Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. I am so excited to bring to you my guest today, Gagan Levy. He's the founder and creative director of an award-winning creative agency called Guru, who works with Patagonia, Numi Tea, Rebel, Net Zero Packaging, the Non-GMO Project, and Jedi, which I want to talk to you about, Gagan. He was the board chair of the prestigious Social Venture Circle and on the board of his teacher Ram Dass's Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. But for everybody to know, I taught him how to swim when he was 5, and I was his babysitter, and I attended his bar mitzvah. So 27 years ago. So I am so excited to see you again. It's been a long time.
It's so good. So good to be here. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I mean, running into you at the Natural Products Expo was like the highlight of, everything. It just, you were, and it was beautiful to run into you in that way too. Like you were talking to Kiss the Ground.
Yep.
And about regenerative agriculture, which is like near and dear to my heart. And I was like, oh my God, yes, you taught me how to swim 35 years ago. And now we've swum back together and we're both working on the same stuff.
Right. And then your mother then did send me a text to say that you do swim and you surf every day. So my swim lessons worked.
Your swim lessons totally paid off. Now I'm not as good as a swim teacher as you. So I've, they always, like people say, get someone else to train your kids to ski and swim. And so I have a great swim teacher out here for my 5-year-old daughter. But yeah, I appreciate you for sure.
That was a long time. It was a very fun time. And just so everybody knows, my mom also worked for his dad for a long time. So very family connected. All right, so let's jump into this where we both found each other, because we were at the Natural Products Expo, which is this show that brings 60, 80, 100,000 people together to talk about how to be better to the earth, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how that show's developed. It was Natural Products Expo, and the tent has gotten pretty wide. It's like all natural products from all over the world. I will say, and we can go into this or not, that I feel like the tent has gotten pretty wide. Like this year, there were things like Tide, chemical. that are there at the Natural Products Expo. So but yeah, it's an amazing, show, and not just like individual brands that are, coming forth, but also like these larger kind of systemic movements that are happening within the natural products industry where, groups of CEOs are coming together and saying like, no, this is important. Like, let's come, if we aggregate our resources, we might be able to make a change here. So yeah, I mean, I've been coming to that show for 15 years or so. And yeah, it's so great to run into you there.
Well, it is, because I've been before. So I'm glad we finally did run into each other. And because this is really important to me. And I went for the food allergy aspect, right? And the dietary needs aspect so that we could feed people at events. But as I started progressing, I'm like, I want meeting planners to know that the food we're buying and hoteliers, the food we're buying, we need to know where it's coming from. And we need to know the soil that is being grown in, hence the Kiss the Ground movie, right? I mean, we need to understand that because it's our largest expenditure and we need to make smart choices with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of what we do is kind of, yes, we're marketing for brands and movements, but we're helping educate consumers around those things because, at the end of the day, like if the end, user or consumer of that product doesn't ask for it, then like the hotels and whatnot are not really going to change, and this is kind of the shift from being like, just bottom line thinking to triple bottom line thinking, like including, the how we treat people, how we treat the planet in the production of our goods, in our consideration set, when we're choosing these things. So, yeah, I mean, meeting you, like, I think it's amazing what you do, because it's really important. I mean, I just went to a summit last week. I spoke at the CEO summit, and everyone's talking about, sustainability, regenerative, purpose. I mean, all the, buzzwords of the day. Yet I go back to my room and there's water bottles, single use, plastic water bottles. And so I said, I have my own water bottle. Can I, use that with some? And, there's no option for me. Yes, the filtered water is in your plastic water bottle in your room,
Yeah.
And being a surfer, I'd rather not use a plastic water bottle, because I know where all that stuff ends up, which is in the ocean. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad this movement is like taking hold, but feeling a little bit of urgency, in speeding it up. And it's at places like Natural Products Expo and others where I feel like we're actually gathering like some of these, CEOs and thought leaders to like not just do the lip service and pledge about it, but actually like execute, operationalize these things within their company, and then just give better choices to consumers. Hopefully they get educated enough that they realize like, oh yeah, like post-consumer recycled plastic, a little better than single use. And then like maybe an aluminum can, like Path water or something like that. It's like, oh, okay, reusable. There you go.
My Path water. There we go. Yeah.
Right.
I love this can. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's a great example of, when you have like a mission with a product rather than just a product with a mission, like the founders of that company were straight up like, how do we get plastic out of our oceans? Number one way is get rid of single-use plastic bottles. So they came up with this idea, crazy idea. Well, let's just sell people these reusable bottles like they get with Swell or any of these other companies, but do it for $3 and the water comes inside. I mean, the water industry now, $6 billion, something like that.
Wow.
It's one of the largest consumer packaged goods kind of industries in the world. And so, yeah, no, I mean, it's things like that. It's little incremental, kind of inventions or improvements that then make it possible for us to like manifest our values and our choices,
Right. Well, and then last year, I had two women that are water sommeliers on the show. And I thought it was interesting. And like, I found this Hawaiian volcanic water at a gas station, which I love because it's volcanic water, but it's a single use plastic bottle.
And they shipped it from Hawaii.
Right. So let's put this in this, right. And let me reuse this. And granted, I'm going to refill it from my fridge, but still I do like the size of it. I broke the lid. So it's leaking on me.
We'll get you another one. But like, I mean, the thing is that, okay, even breaking those two down, like, yes, volcanic water, like probably tastes fantastic, all this. Path water, what they're doing, for instance, is they're not staying beholden to a single source. They'll locally source their water. So it's purified water. It's not, from some volcano in Hawaii or Fiji or whatever. And that's for a reason. It's so that they don't have to ship liquid all over the world.
That's smart. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is kind of, I think, where those choice points are, with businesses is like, how do we build companies and limit like the negative externalities in the production of the business? There's first like the do no harm, like how do we take care of everybody in our supply chain, everybody in the company, those sorts of things. There's like do no harm to the planet, and looking at all the ways we can do that. I mean, no single use plastic, not shipping water all over the world, solar powered, manufacturing. I mean, all these things are totally possible. And then there's like, how do we do good, and then you can start to move into like community give back programs and, those sorts of things. But I find that a lot of companies these days, they kind of like, make their product in whatever way makes as much profit as possible, and then they
Right.
give a little bit back, like and to the community or whatever. And it's like, great, okay, glad you're giving something back, but like, let's focus on how to, maybe not impact the planet as much as possible
Right.
in the actual production of it. So that's why I love that brand, Path Water. It's like inherent to the business is, doing good in some way.
Well, and it kind of brings me to my event. I was in Florida last week managing food and beverage for a conference, and we ended up donating 250 pounds of food that was prepared but unserved. So it didn't go to the front of the house, but it was more of the bulk food. But I had appetizers like stuffed peppadew peppers and little things, and those just all got trashed. I'm like, oh my God, I would have put them in my refrigerator and eaten them all. You shouldn't have thrown them away, right? But they're like that. Nonprofit didn't want the little tiny appetizers. And we had a bunch of, nobody ate my beets. I ordered beets and little things and nobody ate them, unfortunately. They're so good. But I'm like, we should have just piled all those beets into, a bowl and given that bowl to that nonprofit, right? Because you could have done something different with it in that way. And so, and when I'm designing menus, I'm thinking what cut my number, how much I'm ordering, but I also have to think about what's going to be donated at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that when we met, I told you about how, my brother for years was running this nonprofit called Conscious Alliance, and their whole mission is hunger relief. And they just launched this whole program where they're taking close to code food. So what I mean by that is food that is close to hitting that expiration date, even though the expiration date is kind of more suggested. I mean, they're being safe. It's like a Best Buy, but yeah, they're taking that food and they're donating it to local food banks and Native American reservations, specifically things like that. And it's just amazing. Like the more that we can build, I think like a circular, economy. I mean, that's happening with consumer packaged goods, but like you're saying, there's even some nonprofits I've seen out there and some tech platforms in cities, specifically here I live in Marin, but in San Francisco, where they'll pick up your food, that's like would be thrown away and give it away to, to houseless folks. And I just think like the more ways we can find, those capabilities, even with the legal landscape as it is, there's always like, well, is it going to be safe? I mean, we can't give away food that, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, people are hungry and there's extra food here. Like, there's not much more to think about than that,
And there's no mold on it. So, and
it's beets, right? Tasty beets. Or
exactly.
Like it's like good food, it's nutrition dense. Like, I mean, yeah, it kills me to see food waste. My wife laughs because I'm like the vacuum going through the refrigerator all the time because I get like some joy out of it. I'm trying to find like the stuff that's going to go to waste.
And what can I mix with this and what can I mix with that? And one of the package, it's not this one, but I don't know if I still have it, but one of the packages that I got of sample food at Expo West it was smaller than this, but it says this bag is compostable, which is really interesting to me. It's a little orange one. I got to find it. But I'm like, oh my gosh, this little tiny bag, which you normally think just has to go in the trash. It was like, that was compostable. And they thought about the packaging of it, which kind of brings me to that program that you helped launch about the plastic, right?
Yeah.
What's it called? Zero packaging, net zero.
Yeah.
Packaging.
One step closer to zero waste packaging. So there's an organization called One Step Closer.
Okay.
Amazing organization in natural products that has brought together CEOs of a bunch of different brands for the last, 20 years. And brands like Patagonia, Numi Tea, Sambazon, Imlakesh, Alter Eco, like kind of the most conscious brands in each vertical, really. And that's who we love to work with. So I ended up becoming really tribe with all these folks. But what they're doing is launching these different programs that are becoming kind of like systemic change movements within natural products. And so one of them is the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. And it's amazing because, every company is trying to, evolve their packaging to be more sustainable. But this is a group that's like pulling their resources and really making it, like moving through the innovation process to get things like that, like compostable packaging. I mean, it's not easy. Like, one of our clients is Sambazon. Like I mentioned, they sell 90% of the acai in the world. And for those of you who don't know acai, it's like that purple, it usually comes frozen, make smoothies and acai bowls with fruit on top, all that kind of stuff. But it's frozen, right? So they sell it in the freezer aisle. It's really hard to replace plastic in the freezer aisle because to keep the integrity of your product. So they've been working for like 15 years to make this ready to eat bowl that's fully biodegradable. I mean, literally, you can open it up, eat the bowl, and then you could put it in the ground, and and that packaging is fully, compostable. One of our other clients, Clover Sonoma, which is a dairy brand, one of the most conscious dairy brands in the world here in Northern California, they launched the first fully renewable milk carton, so beyond like milk, they're putting like the plastic to make it easier for you to pour out the milk, but that makes it not renewable, recyclable, all these things. And so they launched that. They just did a 50% post-consumer recycled gallon container. So, these companies, they're like out in the world, there's a lot of companies that want to do better. And then there's organizations like this that are actually helping them create the packaging to do it. So yeah, we launched this. A lot of times we get asked to launch these like business to consumer. So B2B to C movements where we're gathering a lot of brands to help educate consumers, for instance, about packaging, and then show them where, companies are making strides forward. And yeah, really proud of that. That was the big kind of movement that we launched this year at Expo, along with, a couple others. But that was kind of, that one gained like, I think 100 companies while we were there at Expo.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It reminds me going way back when the campaign to cut the Coke or soda,
the rings. Yeah.
So that when it ends up, it's not choking a sea lion or a fish or whatever. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane the stats on that, like how much plastic ends up in the ocean,
Exactly. Well, and I went to Vietnam actually 12 years ago, and we were on this little tiny island off the coast of Vietnam, and the dump there was it was high and gross, and the amount of plastic that they were getting. And was it Corona that was doing a campaign to pay the fishermen to collect the plastic out of the ocean? And I posted that a couple of months ago. I thought that was really cool because they were paying them what they get paid to get fish, to do a whole week to also come in and bring in the trash because they're
amazing.
There.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's that. I saw a similar program in India when I was there. Unfortunately, a lot of dumping in India, just dumping the trash and whatnot. And they were starting a program where they could actually, you got paid if you brought pounds of trash to this plant, and they were finding ways to recycle and reuse and stuff like that. Yeah, I think those programs are going to be popping up more and more, hopefully.
Well, that's really good. Now, one of the sessions I went to with you was JEDI and justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And can you tell the listeners about what that means and the fact that J was added to the beginning of it and the DEI was switched around?
Well, us marketers, we got to find a cute way to, get it out there, right?
Yeah.
And who doesn't like Star Wars, right?
Right. Yeah.
But no, I mean, that's the thing is, well, again, it was started by One Step Closer. This is that same group started this. The lead of it is actually this woman, Cheryl O'Laughlin, she was a founder of Plum Organics. She then was the CEO of Cliff Bar. We helped launch Luna Bar for Cliff Bar. Then she became the CEO of Rebel. We became there. And then Jedi was her retirement, although she can't stop. But it's amazing. I mean, people think ever since George Floyd really is I feel like there was this awakening, in our society. Thank God. I mean, it's a shame that it took that. We'll take what we can get. That there's this awakening around principles of, equity really at the core of it, like different from equality, but equity, the fact that there's certain folks that have been held down, like underserved populations that have been held down systemically in our society. So equity would say, well, it's not enough to make equal, but actually to lift up. Like we need to kind of, make sure that there's more justice in our society overall, and in natural products particularly. So this JEDI program kind of addressing a few areas. I mean, one is diversity in natural products hiring. So, it's primarily, it's very white and male and dominated. And, I can't change the color of my skin or my own, gender, but I certainly can contribute to making sure that future generations are, look more diverse. And so it's kind of putting principles in at your company around that. And it's also beyond just the HR piece of it, how we build more equity in food systems. So, there's food deserts all over this country, meaning, places where people, can't really find healthy food. And it's kind of it's a systemic issue because companies that have the best intentions, when they're not distributed in those areas, they're not called to kind of educate those consumers about, health benefits of all different kinds of products. I mean,
right.
For instance, take like a kombucha with probiotics or something and immune, stomach health. If that kombucha is not distributed in a certain area, they're not marketing and educating in that area. So then folks aren't buying those products. So then they don't get distributed in that area and the cycle continues, So
right.
These kinds of programs are meant to be a little more forward thinking in bringing in, like manifesting these principles and making it so companies are leading,
right.
with distributing products into food deserts, hiring in more diverse ways, thinking about, even for me, like as an advertising agency for these sorts of companies, it's like, just the more that if the target audience says, white millennial mom with 2 kids, how can I bring in other target audiences to make sure that they're served up, some of the campaigns that we're developing and the media is actually connecting with them and stuff like that. So anyway, I mean, I could go on for a while. It's really a place of real passion for us at Guru, and and thank God, again, like purpose being this kind of buzzword that's the word of the day. Like it's one of those things. Like sure, it's people are jumping on because they're being socially pressured to, but thank God it's happening. It's so needed.
Yeah. Well, and I gave a presentation last month in Colorado called Purpose. You are what you eat. Welcome to the purpose-driven food movement.
I love that.
And they actually gave me the title and I just spoke to it, which was great. Meetings Industry Colorado. But I'm sitting there prepping for it. And it really is event food. And you probably witnessed this a little bit. And actually I chatted with somebody that went to a different medical convention recently. And it's just like we get used to picking off. I want the deli sandwich on Monday or deli platters on Monday. And I want the Mexican on Tuesday. And I want this on Asian on Wednesday. And it's just that thought. There's no purpose to it. And we really need to put the purpose back into why we're feeding them and what we're feeding them. Because my budget last week was $335,000 before tax and gratuity. So it'll end up being $500,000 for just 500 people. So $1,000 per person for a 2.5-day conference.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's it. What you just said it right there. These are symptomatic issues. If we can get more mindful and intentional, just about our choices and how we enter, business relationships and everything. I mean, when I'm going to lunch, I just took someone to lunch yesterday. It's like, I'm thinking about the restaurant that manifests my values.
Right.
I'm going to a local place that's organic, that treats their people well. I mean, those things, it's like, how often, we bring our values to certain categories. Like when a lot of folks shop in the, produce aisle or something like that, they wouldn't think of not getting organic. Right.
Right.
But then they go to get a bottle of wine or, They go to, restaurant or whatever, and the values kind of go up. I mean, and also we do the best we can. It's not about being like making it too, rigid. I'm not trying, God knows, like I'm, not that, but doing the best we can, and just being intentional about it. Like you said, it's like, God, if that's your budget, for 500 people, like, wow, like what an influence you can have, on not just that meeting, but on the actual people at that hotel, at the caterers, like all that, I mean, making those opportunities to just not necessarily like get on your soapbox, but just like, educate a tiny bit about like, little shifts in choices and thinking. And I find that it starts with that like intentionality, that you mentioned. Yeah.
Well, and I'm going back to that meeting last week. I actually had the convention services or the banquet captain take pictures of me in a chair sitting next to the buffet. And I'm trying to reach for the muffins that are on this top shelf. And I can't so I'm trying to replicate. I'm a person utilizing a wheelchair or a scooter. And can I reach that? Right. And my friend Joan, I post these, and God love her. She's like, Tracy, well, what about this? And what about this? And so with each one of her questions, I still learn, right? And they had put toasters in front of the bagel display. And like, that's electrical hazard, right? I mean, so it's learning. But while the banquet captain was taking my photos, the servers were watching, and they were like saying, oh, well, never thought about that. Right. And so it's just, I wanted to take the pictures for my own slides, but then at the same time I was educating. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and what a beautiful gift, for, I mean, that's really, it's like, that's being human, it's like, I mean, it's funny that, you taught me how to swim when I was 5, but learning to swim is like, you do the wrong thing and you learn not to do that again. Right. And I think, everyone wakes up every morning and wants to manifest their values and their choices. There's the only reason you don't is there's some like lack of convenience, or you're not educated about a certain thing, packaging, for instance, or, how something was grown, or, the 17 syllable word that's inside that product,
those drive me
and you're
nuts.
like, and you don't even know, and then and you're like, oh, okay, now I can make a different choice,
Right.
And I mean, it's like my meditation teacher she used to say, her name's Sharon Salzberg, and she would always say, in meditation, like she's been meditating for 50 years, and as still in every meditation, she sits and she'll get pulled off on some thought, some tangent that like she's like, God, and then there's a moment where she's pulled off and she's like, oh, my intention was to be meditating right now. I should bring myself back to meditation. And so, but she does it with like humor, she kind of laughs at herself a little bit, like, oh, there I am again, and like brings herself back, not with judgment, but like just back with some compassion. And, I think that's like the same thing with our choices. Like when we walk through as business leaders or consumers or whatever, setting up meetings, it's like, okay, like, oh, I made that, mistake again. It's like, okay, it's just like a little awareness, like bring myself back and then make a better choice,
I love that. You're only judging yourself, and you need to just say, okay, hey, that happened and let's get on with it. Right. Or go back to where we were, right. What we were doing. You said it's having a product with purpose, or how did you say that? It was.
It's something I say a lot. So it's having a mission with a product rather than a product with a mission.
Okay. So as the marketing guru that you are, how does an organization begin to do that? Right. Or, if they have this, change their philosophy around it, and even an event, how do you create that event to do the same thing?
Yeah. Well, okay. First off, I have to tackle this marketing guru thing because so the reason I called this company Guru. The real meaning of guru, which is this term that's kind of been bastardized in our society a little bit, is facilitator. So seeing the light in somebody and bringing that forth, And so
Okay.
we really, when we say we are guru, it also means the collective. So Thich Nhat Hanh, another amazing Buddhist teacher, would say the Sangha, the next Buddha is the Sangha, or the next Buddha is the community. So the thought being there is no guru on some mountain that you go to and for all the answers, right? So like guru as like our name as this agency, the whole idea is we are guru, like all of us, we all have the answers. And if we bring them forth, like we'll have a more thriving world. So anyway, sorry, that's my
I love that.
Commercial break. But I just, a lot of times that, when I'll be referred to as like, oh, so you're the guru of, it's like, well, here's actual meaning in it. And so, and I think hopefully that, helps even with this next piece, which is like, like how to have a mission with a product, what it means is having a real theory of change, and then bringing a product forward or a business forward that helps, operationalize that theory of change in some way in the world, and really it came from just realizing this kind of need, this shift I said earlier from the single bottom line business to a triple bottom line business, and not just making widgets and selling them being enough. So what I mean by that and how you do it is, first you crystallize your purpose, you really clarify your purpose for being. And purpose is this nebulous word, but to me, it means, like, for instance, taking the, sustainable development goals, for instance, which are, these 17 goals put out by the United Nations over the last decade. It's probably the most widely accepted rubric for impact, which has these themes like clean oceans or regenerative agriculture or, healthy cities.
No
stuff
hunger.
Like
Yep.
No hunger. Exactly.
Yeah.
So as a company, I really think like gathering just crystallizing and being very clear about what you're trying to do in the world. Like Rebel, who we work with, or worked with, that we don't work with them anymore, but is a ready to drink, product that is sourcing ingredients from the Amazon. Their whole reason for being is to end human trafficking in Peru, in South America. And the way to do that, they started out of a nonprofit that was just giving money to folks that were being pulled into this awful, industry. 50 million people around the world are being human trafficked right now.
Wow.
And so their thought was, well, if we create a sustainable business and build a vertically integrated supply chain, then we can help, folks, the farmers, the manufacturers, like in that region, have more opportunity that will pull them out of these other things like human trafficking, sex trafficking, stuff like that. So clarity around human trafficking. Next, from that clarity, you have to move to alignment of your stakeholders, and I think the key stakeholder that are jumped over a lot of the time is your workforce. Like, how do you build a movement from the inside out? I mean, truly, like, aligning your folks around that purpose, for being, and building a campaign, a communication strategy about that, making it clear, and then helping them, get on board. And then the third area is like enablement, or empowering your workforce or your investors or your consumers, your other stakeholders, to actually, make good and help, execute on that mission, the overall mission of the company. That's the way to do it. We have a whole, process to move companies through. And that came out of like being an advertising guy and realize, like, so many companies were coming to us saying, hey, can you, do our marketing about, all these values? And it's like, well, are you operationalizing those values within your company first? Like, we don't do greenwashing. So really digging in. And I mean, that's, but that's without getting into too much detail. Like, that's kind of the process of like clarity, alignment, enablement, to move into being a mission with a product, rather than just developing a product. And this is okay too, I should say, like, and then reverse engineering mission, saying like, okay, we've got this product now. People seem to care about doing good in the world. Like, shouldn't we have a mission, like some give back strategy or something like that? And sure, like we'll get those projects too, but then we we'll take them back to their core and make sure it, like, that starts to get woven into the very fabric of the company,
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And my friend Zoe posted an article about DEI, and it kind of goes into that. You just can't just say, I'm going to do this, right? We're going to implement DEI. You have to go back into where it all inside the company, and what are your policies and procedures, and what do your employees and your vendors and your customers think, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's like, okay, great. You did a Black Lives Matter blog post, and
Right.
on Juneteenth, you put a black square on your social media.
Right.
But like, come on, I mean, this is like systemic racism that needs to be fought and actively fought, not just like, I mean, I had my eyes opened when I did this workshop on critical race theory, and the woman said, racism is not just like, putting on a white hood like Ku Klux Klan. Like that's not just that's extreme racism, but racism's also not doing anything to fight against racism.
Right.
And that was like, wow, okay. That really opened my eyes. I was like, it's not enough to just, do certain things that like other people are going to see, or like curing little symptomatic, issues. I mean, take my industry, for instance, marketing and advertising. It's like, it's dominated, white male industry. And so I'm super proud of we've got our at our agency, like 75% women, we're like 40% people of color. We try to bring a multicultural lens to everything that we do. We'll push back on clients for not having certain target audiences as they're, in the brief, and, all these sorts of things. But I mean, it's taking like me and us to do core work, to really authentically shift it. And it'll be lifetime of work of unraveling, I mean, actually, you'll appreciate this because we grew up on the same street, Deerhorn Court in Shipley's Choice, right? In Maryland, right? In between Annapolis and Baltimore, really, privileged, beautiful place to live. So the same workshop, she had us close our eyes and do this kind of mindfulness exercise where she said, okay, I want you to think about how many people of color lived in your neighborhood growing up. And I closed my eyes and I thought about Shipley's Choice, and I was like, not a lot of Black people in our neighborhood, And then she said, okay, if there's not people of color in your neighborhood, where did they live? And I'm thinking, okay, like and she wanted us to answer this from like our 5-year-old self. And so I'm thinking, okay, Baltimore, and other, Glen Burnie, like some other areas around. Now, what did you think of those areas? Like think of the impression that in your parents or teachers or other influential people gave to you about those areas. And tears just started coming. I just started thinking about, they're dangerous, don't go there. And that became synonymous with people of color. I mean, I'm saying these things in a very open way, and I'm not being glib about it. I mean, it's really serious core, processing that I have to unravel for the rest of my life, And so like when you're taught that way, okay. And then she said, of your teachers, like how many teachers were people of color? Okay, if they weren't people of color, how many of them studied critical race theory and taught you about that? Right. Like, I mean, but we live in an amazing time where, because of George Floyd, there's this awakening that's happening, and others, I mean, remiss not to say all the other names, but there's this awakening that's happening, and it's beautiful, and it's like, there's people that misstep. I mean, there's woke culture and, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's like, it's way overdue, and it's happening, and it's beautiful, Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're talking about those neighborhoods, I remember my dad used to taught me how to get around DC, and people are like, you're driving through those parts of DC. And I'm like, yeah, what's the big deal? And they're like, it's dangerous. I'm like, I'm going to drive with my window down. I don't care. It's fine. As long as you're aware of your surroundings. And I mean, it could be in your neighborhood. It could be in your own neighborhood. It could have happened in Shipley's Choice. Somebody could have shot a gun off in Shipley's Choice. Right. But yeah, It does make me.
I mean, I'm about to take a road trip down in Mexico. My family, we're going to live down in Mexico for a couple months this summer. And part of that is immersing my kids in a, different culture and different language and all of that. And, I'm driving down through Baja. I mean, it's a 24-hour drive to the tip of Baja, then a 12-hour ferry that goes to mainland Mexico. And, I tell people that, they're like, oh my God, what about the cartels? Like, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, and I mean, it just shows like, I mean, yes, there is danger everywhere and there's danger there and these sorts of things, but it's like, then like that gets in our head about like Mexico and then Mexicans and it, and then we just start to categorize as we do, as humans. And it's a shame, so I think there's like some of that core kind of, it's like rewiring the synapses in some way to kind of forget some of how we were wired as kids. And, I can say for myself, like living in a, pretty well-off, white suburb of Baltimore, drive 20 minutes and, oh my God, not a great area.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. But Pat Sajak lives down the street too,
Right. Right.
Does he still live down there? Somewhere down there.
Right. I know. It was like Chartwell or something, right? It was you can go to Pat Sajak's house.
Exactly. Right. That was rude. But he does live there because he married a woman from there. That's why he moved there. Yeah. Okay. So jumping back to food, we were talking about before we got on the show that I introduced a chef recently to, what is that egg called? Just Egg, because it's vegan. And it was at the show, and it ironically is made by an egg manufacturer, which I was mind blown by. But they have a QR code on the back. It says, scan this. You can see our testing. They tested allergens because I'm like, the egg allergy thing. But how do we get the products that you wrap into hotels? And it actually, before you answer that, I was talking to a gentleman who used to work for a hotel. And when he used to work at Yale, he said the distribution options, the food options around there were really higher end because Yale required it, right? They wanted grass-fed, grass-finished beef, and they wanted these, they had these standards. And so anybody in that area, the food distributing companies had a better, higher quality food or options because they had that. But if you go to Idaho, right, there's not necessarily a large company like Yale or university that's kind of mandating that to pull those products into that region. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, it does. Well,
it goes back to the food desert in a way, right?
Yeah. I mean, more folks like you, making it happen. I mean, it takes pressure, really. It's education on the buyer side, and it takes pressure from the event producer side to bring things forth with their values. I mean, it's interesting. A friend of mine is working at Rivian, an electric car company, and they're doing all these events, and she's really interested in bringing a lot of our clients in. She's like, oh my God, you're like a one-stop shop, because you've got, Wild Planet, which is the most conscious, like tuna. They're doing these ready-to-eat bowls. And we've got Sambazan doing acai bowls, and Numi doing tea, and, Clover doing dairy. And she's like, literally, you've curated like all the most conscious brands in each vertical. So, that's the, on the demand side, like we look at these principles and things, I really do. That's why like meeting you, it's like awesome. Like we all have a part to play, and it's like, that's that like we are guru kind of thought is like, well, gosh, like if I can just, tell you, because you've got the values and then you've got the power as well, like in your meetings, the hope is that it becomes contagious. It's like my dad has a financial advisor that's been helping him for 40 years, and pretty traditional firm. And then I finally had enough money, over the last decade to start having a financial advisor. So he said, oh, you should use, him. And I started talking to him, and I say, the first thing I said, well, first off, I need you to divest anything I have that's doing any harm. Like I need to get out of the carbon underground 200 and like any of that, like mutual. He's like, well, how do your mutual funds, you're in like a bunch of stuff. I said, look, my number one priority is not investing in anything where I'm doing harm. My second priority would be doing good. Right. And then, and then, yeah, it'd be nice to make money too, like over years, if we're investing. And so he and I have had this really cool journey over the last decade of like me educating him around these different funds and these different tools to do more socially responsible investing. So I use that example as a parallel because I think in the same way, we need to educate, those buyers on the other side and those hotels. I mean, it's like, and it's better for business too. I mean, that's the funny thing. It's like, when I was at this hotel last week and they've got, in my room, single-use plastic water bottles, and I'm at this convening. We're taking every room of the hotel. And in this convening is, I'm talking about net zero packaging, yet I've got these single-use plastic bottles in the hotel room. And I'm like, come on.
Right.
Why not have the Path water bottle? And so somewhere in the line, either someone was too lazy or they didn't know about, this option, or worst of all, honestly, is they knew about it, but they didn't have the budget. Like that water bottle is 10 cents more expensive, than something else. And Path water isn't, by the way. You can, for anyone listening, like it's the same price. So I think that more of that, we need to educate and then make those choices possible. And then hopefully people wake up to the point that they're like, okay, I'm going to manifest my values with my choice in my business or in my personal life. Right.
Well, and you say it's $3. The hotels are charging $7.25 for this in a meeting room. And in your hotel room, it's $11. And it's not volcano water. It's like, and so, I mean, if I can get these in, right, for less than $7, right. Or, let's stay at the hotels are like, well, I can't get that from my distributor. So we have to work on who those distributors are and who those approved vendors are, because they're being held back by corporate saying you can only buy from these people. And
well, that's the other thing. I mean, it's the bureaucracy in the system, of like, well, they're not an approved vendor, so we can't. It's like, no, your hotel guests would like you to not use single-use plastic water bottles. Figure it out.
Right. Exactly. Like,
I mean, I hate to be so blunt, and I mean, it's actually where I'm going with the company, with our agency Guru. It's interesting because for years it's a very loving place, and we're not going anywhere from that. I mean, our whole mission is to increase joy and reduce suffering on the planet. We do that for ourselves, we do that for our clients, and through our clients for the world. But I'm moving into more activist kind of positioning, with the agency. I'm just like feeling the urgency. I got a 5-year-old and an 8-month-old daughter, and I'm like, you know what? Like, figure it out. Like, get rid of single-use plastic. It's like, it's possible. Your consumers want it. There's zero reason not to, move in that direction. So, unless someone can give me a really viable, answer as to why you're not doing it, I'm like really beating on, and we won't work with companies that aren't. I mean, this is one topic I could go into, get on my soapbox about, the rest. But in particular, I'm a surfer. I really care about the oceans, and we're literally killing our ability, not even our planet, because the planet's going to be fine, but our ability for the planet to be habitable by us as humans. And it's like, 90% of the top layer of the ocean is plastic now.
Wow.
I mean, microplastic. It's not just these like islands of plastic that are gathering out in the Pacific. It's microplastic. You can't see it. It's in the water, as much as water is plastic. And it's just, it's unfathomable to me that people are still making companies that are using this much, plastic. It's crazy. So anyway, like, I mean, I'll get off my soapbox for now, but there are these, we just put this whole campaign, net zero packaging, and we're working with organizations like the Climate Collaborative, which is like 800 natural products brands, which are making different commitments around climate action. We put out a whole ebook on our site, weareguru.com, which is about how to catalyze your consumers in climate action with you. It's actually the best way to build love and loyalty with your consumers is engage them in the movement,
Right. Yep.
Don't market at people anymore. Like bring them into the movement, meet them where their values are. It's like, marketing's gotten pretty easy. It's like do less, be authentic, like help people manifest their values, and you'll be in a great place as a company. You'll develop love,
Well, and I think that is really even George Floyd, but also the pandemic and bringing back and having purpose with what you're doing is like people are choosing to do events with purpose, right? Do I really need to go to the Natural Products Expo or XYZ company convention? Make sure that you've got the right purpose behind that. So
that's right. Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So you just said your website, but tell everybody again where they can find you. Cassie, be quiet.
I've got my dog here too, biting at my ankles. So our website, weareguru.com.
Okay.
That's where you can find us. Don't be a stranger. I mean, if you've got a company that's looking to fest your values, we will work with you to help kind of crystallize that purpose. And what we're most known for is kind of building creative campaigns and brands that then bring that into the world and then engage influencers and consumers and other stakeholders in that movement and make better choices for themselves.
Right.
Yeah. And this has been like so fun. I mean, really to reconnect with you is like, it's just such a joy. Really. I so love seeing you and what you're doing and your purpose. And I'm so glad to know what you're bringing into the world to these different convenings and meetings and helping people be more conscious around that. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. All right. I have one final question. If you could eat dinner with anyone, dead or alive, around the world, who would it be and what would you eat? Oh, I actually have one more question after that.
It's a great question. I would love, it's kind of far out, but Buckminster Fuller is like one of the most interesting humans. I think he's an inventor and just kind of at the core of a lot of my philosophy and stuff. So I'd love to share a nice warm Indian meal with Buckminster Fuller, like eating some curry and some chai and, like a nice long drawn out meal on like sitting on cushions. that'd be a dream. The other one I was thinking about was Bob Marley. I'll stick with Buckminster Fuller.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And then one final question to end it is, and I know I asked you this before pre-show but what does in your work a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean?
Gosh, that's a great question. It means that people have the ability to manifest their values in what they're eating. And that means taking care of people and the planet in the way those products were created and sourced. It means they're regenerative and that hopefully how they were grown, carbon was taken out of the air and put back into the soil where it belongs. It means they're organic. It means they're non-GMO. Big plug for Non-GMO Project, who were a client of ours. It means that they're giving back to their local communities, that the packaging is thoughtful and hopefully compostable or renewable in some way. I could keep going, but I think you're that
I totally get it.
That the people at that company are taken care of, and hopefully they're a B Corp. Hopefully they're a 1% for the planet member. Kind of, for me, it's like there wouldn't even necessarily be a brand name. It's just all certifications and, values all over that brand. That's what's most important to me. And it really says a lot when someone invites me to a meeting or a convening and how that meeting or convening, all the choices in that are intentional. And maybe there's those of us that are just a little busy to get so intentional about it. And I'll end with this. The Dalai Lama always said, if you don't have 10 minutes to meditate, you probably need 20. and so, for those of us that are so busy that we can't think about it, maybe really put a spot in your calendar to just sit and think about that, your choices as a business and as a consumer.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Everybody, this is my friend Gagan, Jared Levy. We've known each other for 35, 40 years. Yeah. So pleasure. I'm so glad we reconnected, and we will connect offline again. Everybody, thank you for listening. This is the Eating at a Meeting podcast. So until then, stay safe and eat well.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.